Greg, you're a photographer. You're on the other side of that camera day in and day out. Tell me, what kind of stupid things is it that people usually do when you come by with a camera?
Well, I guess the biggest one is, hi, Mom.
Stand by. Is this thing on?
Yes, Dan.
Oh, hello.
You're listening to Old News with Dan and Carrie.
This just in.
Breaking news to report.
We are live.
Old newscasters
Can we just say former?
Sure. Former newscasters reunite behind the mic after more than 20 years.
Old news is good news.
Stay tuned.
And we are back on Old News with Dan and Carrie.
You know, we've talked to a lot of people who we've had intersections with in our life along the way as in the TV business. And for me, this guy's like a bad penny. I cannot get rid of him. He keeps showing up. But in all seriousness, there's some people that you owe a lot to in your life. And Gregg Schieve is one of those people. Mm-hmm. Not only was he probably one of the best journalists, one of the best photographers I've ever worked with, but he was also one of the best people I ever worked with. And he's with us today. He worked at Channel 27 way back when Carrie and I did, and we're glad he's with us today.
Yes. Welcome, Greg.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Dan. Hi, Carrie. Thanks for that introduction. How much do I owe you for being on the show?
Just a big hug, Greg, a big hug and a peck on the cheek.
And we owed you because you made our backgrounds and you took the picture that's our promotional picture, and we appreciate that.
Well, it was fun. You guys are fun to work with. I had a thought right off the bat here. Listening, I went through the other podcasts and I listened to them all, believe it or not.
You're the one guy.
I didn't shut them down. But I was struck with how everyone went to different markets throughout their career, including you two. Mm-hmm. And I was struck by the fact that I stayed at Channel 27 my whole career in television news. Yeah. And what kind of happened was I didn't have to change stations because the station that I worked at continually changed personnel. So I just stayed there. I didn't have to move. I didn't have to buy a new house. I just stayed in Madison and everything changed around me. So it was but it's kind of interesting how all the other people jumped markets and things like that. And that was not something I wanted to do. Mm-hmm. Early in my career, I decided I wanted to stay in Madison. I loved living in Madison, and we had just started a family, and I didn't want to raise my kids in a big city or those kinds of things. So, plus I always hate getting rejected, and I didn't want to try to get into a big market only to be rejected and say
there's no rejection in TV. Only acceptance. You never, and Carrie never left Channel 27 either. She left there as a TV person, but she never went to another TV market either.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, that was my one and only. Yeah, they were really desperate when I got hired, so I was in the right place at the right time. They had no staff, and I had just completed my internship, so they're like, please, we need a breathing person to work here.
Yeah.
Well, Greg, and you came to Madison kind of back in the days of, a lot of people think of Madison and they think of the Vietnam War era and they think of the protests and the long hair. And you kind of showed up in Madison a little bit, maybe right at the end of that. But when did you start in TV at KOW?
I moved to Madison in 1977. Okay. And you're right. It was the war protests were kind of winding down at that point, and things were kind of returning to normal, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And you wanted to be an artist, didn't you, at first, or were you?
I was an art major in college and high school. So I got out of school and I go like, okay, now what the heck do I do with an art major? So I moved to Madison, not really knowing what I wanted to do, but I knew I had an interest in photography. So I started looking around, like, where could I get a job? Like, I even looked at camera stores and just anything that had something to do with photography. And it dawned on me that TV stations have cameras, and they
They
Use
did,
them.
yes.
in case you guys didn't know that. And so I one day I drove out to Channel 27 and showed up and said, "Are you guys hiring? Are you taking applications?" And I can't remember the woman who was at the front desk, but she called back to this guy in this other office by the name of Ted Green, and she said, "Is Jimmy's job still open?" And
But what
Ted
happened to
said,
Jimmy?
I don't know. Ted said yes, and well, what does someone need to do to work here to take Jimmy's job? And he said, I swear to God, he said, "Can he add?"
Oh, so you didn't get the job then?
Right. Yeah.
Right.
'Cause
Yeah.
I told him I can't. I just lied and I said, "Yeah, I can add." So I got the job right away. It was called the film room back then. And what I did was I spliced together film commercials, like national commercials, and I timed out sitcoms that were on film. Like I think between like about 3:30 and 6 o'clock every day we ran I Love Lucy and Little Gang and all these, old sitcoms. And I would have to time out where the commercial breaks were in those shows.
Oh my
So I
God.
did all that. And then I'd have to build spot reels so that the commercials aired during certain times. I would get a log and I'd have to build the spot reel, and all those commercials were built onto one reel.
So when you say you built a spot, you were actually splicing film together?
Yep.
Oh
I
my
had to
gosh,
splice
I
it all
cannot imagine.
onto this reel,
Hmm.
and hopefully in the right order and the right commercial and all that stuff. And I'm always been really adept at learning a job and trying to do it efficiently.
Mm-hmm.
And I got so good at this job that I could do it in about 5 or 6 hours out of an 8-hour day.
Oh, really? Did
What'd you
you
do
tell
for the
them?
other 3
Yeah.
hours?
The other 3 hours, I went into the control room. I hung out with the other people. I went into Jerry Emmerich's office. I'd hang out he was the production manager. I'd hang out in his office. For some unknown reason, they tabbed me to be this person that they would bring into the news department to run the news film processor. We were still shooting film back then. And I
It's because
shot.
you were fast. It's because you were fast, and they were like, "Get
Yeah.
that German kid in here. He's very efficient."
Yes. But the thing was, I would also have to shoot still photos for commercials, for down and dirty, cheap
really?
commercials, and they had no idea about what my photography skills were because they'd never asked. So then I got into news, and
So you were shooting news then?
I was not shooting news. I was
Okay.
running the processor. We made 2 runs a day.
So what does that mean that you made 2 runs a day?
The photographers and reporters would bring in their cans of exposed film. I'd have to go into the dark and load it onto this big reel that would then run into the machine and process the film.
So there's a lot of chemicals in that process and everything too. So it kind of explains a lot about you, Gregg.
Yeah, I did wear a mask at times, but not all the time. And there was an exhaust fan in the room, but it was a small room and it was closed.
I just can't believe how much it changed from when you started to when we were there to what it is now. It's like it's gone through such an evolution.
Yeah, I counted. I went through 4 news acquisition. They call it news acquisition formats. I went through 4 of those in my career there.
So what were they? There were film. What else?
Film, and then 3/4 inch tape, and then beta tape, and then DVC Pro.
And we should tell people if they're not watching this on YouTube and they're listening, behind Gregg is the WKOW land sign that he somehow acquired from Channel 27. We don't know how.
Maybe late night shenanigans.
One of those things he found. But
I would find stuff and just hang on to it.
yeah, because it was probably going to get thrown out anyways. It would have probably gone into the dumpster. Yep, see, there's the old mic flag, 27 WKOW-TV.
That thing went on the microphone when you were interviewing people so they
Yep,
could see
yep.
it was us.
I always think of my early time there. I was there for 20 years.
Yeah.
And my early time there was really one of the golden periods of local TV news.
Yeah.
Because I might have been naive, but it didn't seem like management cared much about the news, about whether or not the news generated income. And so we, when I started working with John Stofflet, I know he's been on the show in the mid 80s, and we would do some really interesting stuff. And I say interesting with quotes because John has a very quirky sense of humor.
You're kidding.
And no, I'm not. And we would do news features on some pretty kind of far out stuff that he'd come up with in his head.
Does this really look like a mom? People wave, of course. That's always big. And there are other people who pretend they don't want to be on TV, but they really do. Get out of here, come on.
Well, and Bill Shirk specifically was thanking you for that fact that you allowed him, in his words, to fail, which he said helped him more than anything because you trusted him to kind of try things out and try new things as he was developing his own style and find his way. And he was really grateful. And actually, your name came up, as you probably heard, in just about every episode that we did. Always good. Always.
It's a lot to live up to. I think Bill undersold himself a bit because I consider some of the stories I did with him to be pretty good stories, really solid, fun stories. We did one on a crew that was taking down old water towers. They'd call them witch hats.
Let's get ready to tumble!
But yeah, those are the things you remember. And, you obviously had been shooting a while by then. So you were in the film processing room until what, like 1980-ish? And then you picked up a camera and started shooting news?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Shortly after I started in processing the film in the dark room, there was starting to be talk about this new format that was sweeping the industry called videotape. And I could see the writing on the wall because we were going through 30,000 feet of film a month.
Oh my gosh.
Wow.
And film is like, once you expose it, it's done. You can't use it again. All these chemicals are going down the drain. And the bean counters started thinking, well, we could get this videotape equipment and we could buy a case of tapes and that'll last us for the whole year, but as you guys know, the tape, we just went through thousands of tapes too.
Oh yeah.
But so they started buying this video gear and they started buying some state-of-the-art video cameras that were state-of-the-art back then. You got the HL79s.
The old tube cameras. Yep.
Tube cameras. And I started seeing that. I'm going like,
your job is going away.
Yeah, but I think more important to my credit was I was thinking that's what I want to do.
Oh.
I want to start shooting with one of those cameras because I started getting that satisfaction from putting moving pictures together.
And were they open to that?
Yeah, very much so. Paul Pittis was the news director at the time, and he and I got along very well. One of my most favorite news directors of all the ones that I worked with. And then John Scapel was our chief photographer at the time. And he was this tall, kind of gruff Marine type guy, but he had long hair. He was kind of a hippie.
So you liked him then?
I liked him,
Yeah.
but he would treat you pretty gruffly if you weren't doing something right, but then he'd praise you, 5 minutes later, kind of thing. And I remember him distinctly going up to a new photographer saying, "Any more zooming and you're out of here." Just like that. So it was very clear, his
Yeah.
instructions were very clear.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, he was killed in a car
Oh,
accident.
no.
I was promoted to chief after that
Oh, that's when you became chief.
at a
84?
huge salary of $16,000 a year.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So you're finally able to eat McDonald's for lunch.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
once in a while. So
Wow.
how many photographers did you have at that time that you were able to move into the chief position? You must have been one of the
Well,
most
we
senior
did.
photographers.
So we were down to myself and three other people,
Hmm.
3 other photographers,
Oh my gosh.
which would be perfect for a newsroom today.
Now it's pretty much expected, I think. All of them
Yeah.
are Jays.
Well, even back in the day when we were shooting film, reporters shot film.
Hmm.
Oh,
They would take a
yeah.
small film camera out and shoot film. So
Oh.
it's not completely unheard of. I think when video came in, it was this new format and it was kind of mysterious, like, oh, only, certain people that are trained to know how to use this gear can use it. And it over time, the cameras got a lot easier to use. And so we could have dummies like Dan take his camera, forget his camera up in Escanaba.
Yeah. Oh, you heard that one. Yeah. I also
Yeah.
dropped one to the bottom of Lake Michigan once too. I think I told you that story.
What was
Well-
that teeny little camera that's on your desk that you showed us earlier?
Yeah. This
Toy.
is not a real camera. It's a toy.
It's just a model.
So this is the point we're going to show the old picture of Gregg with his news camera, and so people can see what Gregg looked like back in the 80s, because he did send me a picture. So this is Gregg back in the 80s. Take a look. He's the one
You'll
with
have
the
to go to
the
YouTube.
long curly hair. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
And you'll notice that sorry, Dan, but there was a camera and then there was a recorder, and they were connected by a cable. And I would say the combination of those two was probably close to 30 pounds.
Yeah.
Well, being at the station so long, you've worked with countless reporters coming in, always new people. What were the hard parts about that, and what was the benefit of that?
That's a great question.
Thanks.
I must say that, yeah, you should work in news. I must say that I did not work with you two all that much. I worked with Dan. Dan and I covered a Super Bowl one year, the one out in San Diego with the Packers.
Yeah, we got all the leftover stories.
Yeah, and I did a few things with you, Carrie, but you were kind of on a different shift and everything. So
today, he's grateful for a whole lot more, for something he never expected.
This wouldn't happen if you want to hire me.
Carrie Kokens, 27 News.
I would say the good part about new people coming into the station was there was new blood, there was new ideas. There were people coming in that really wanted to kind of make a mark for themselves. And that's what I've always liked about, or I always liked about TV news, was people, it was a career to people. It was not just a job, and they would own their craft and try to get a job someplace else, or work up in the ranks in the station and become an anchor or whatever. The bad thing was, and I think this is what really got me to thinking about leaving the station. And then I just came to the conclusion that, do I want to really be chasing snowstorms and car accidents when I'm 60 years old? And the answer was no.
Too bad. Just think of what you missed. Think of all the snowstorms you
know.
missed. Greg, do you have a story though over those years, an old news story that sticks out to you as like one that you're never going to forget? Not for being funny, but for being a story that had some significance and was a big story.
Wow.
That's a tough.
That's kind of difficult. I think what really stands out was a highlight of mine in my career was covering the Rose Bowl in the end of '93. Tony Galley and I were sent out to Los Angeles to cover the game from a news perspective, and so we were there for a whole week. We did a story every day about some aspect of fans, or Tony actually broke the ticket scam.
Yeah, I remember that, the ticket scam. That was a big story.
Yeah, where people had signed up to be on these tours or whatever. What do they call it, Dan? Gary?
Like through
they would sign up and they would get flown out a charter.
Yeah.
So and then what was happening though is there was such a demand for tickets that these people that were organizing these charters started selling them to other people. And so some people got out there and they did not have a ticket to the game, and they were not very happy.
No.
Obviously.
Obviously.
And the game itself back then, as a news person, you could go anywhere in the stadium with the camera.
Wow.
And you can't do that anymore. You can't even get into the game as a local crew anymore.
Oh, really?
That changed with the playoff, the national championship playoff system. But back then I wandered up in the stands. I was in the press box. I was down on the field. I was up in the stands at one point, just shooting fans, cheering and stuff like that. And these people, I was looking back toward and facing the people that were watching the game. And these people were looking at me and they were like pointing down, and I'm like, what are you pointing at? And like, I was not blocking their view or anything, but they kept like, look over there. And I look around, like virtually right next to me is Chris Farley and who was it he was with?
His buddy?
Yeah.
David Spade?
No, it was I should have looked this up before.
Tom Arnold.
I think it was Tom Arnold.
Tom Arnold.
And they were cheering. They were standing there like right next to me cheering on the Badgers.
That's amazing.
So, I mean, the cool thing is having that access, you can get a lot of really unique pieces of video and shots and things like that. And I was right down at the end of the game where the UCLA was driving and where the game ended. And we were right there on the sidelines for that.
Did you get to talk to Chris Farley?
Not really. It was just kind of like, he knew I was shooting him, and so
he didn't mug for the camera, did he? Because he wasn't like that.
No,
very laid back.
No.
Oh, he was the best. My husband played a pickup basketball game with him. That was my husband's claim to fame. One time at the Red Gym in Madison when he was in college. So it's like he was playing and then, or else he was asked to play, but he was like, oh, I can't or something. But there was some kind of basketball something that.
Oh yeah.
He
was the year ahead of me in high school, so I played football.
Oh, really?
I always tell people I was a little huskier in high school, and Chris was a big dude. So we actually had the fat guy bond where we would both be the last guys to finish sprints together. So
oh my
that was nice. It was nice to have that. Greg, you made me think of something when Ryan Moore and I used to go way back when the Packers were first starting to get good again in the early 90s, and we'd go up to Green Bay and cover stories up there. And that was the same back then. You could like go on the sideline at Packer games and we'd shoot all kinds of stuff. But there was this one crew that always came from Eau Claire. And
I know what you're gonna
they had a camera and an umbilical, and one of them would carry the deck, and the other guy would carry the 3/4-inch camera. They'd never shoot. They weren't really shooting. They were just some guys from sales in Eau Claire who
Oh
they were
my
just on the sideline to
gosh.
watch the game. So I think they got onto that at some point, and that's one of the reasons they shut that all down.
I had heard that they took the
Amazing.
guts out of the camera, so it wasn't very heavy.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure. Because those, like you said, they were 30 pounds. But yeah, that's the
Took the
kind of
guts
stuff.
out and filled it with snacks.
Yeah,
Drinks.
yeah. So Greg, you were the chief then until about what, 90? Or no, about 98, and then you left. And what did you do then? I lost track
can't
of you.
remember. It was so. It was such a
It was
blur.
hibernating during that time.
Actually, I left then, and I
Oh, and that's when you
Started
started
business.
TV photo?
I knew a couple things about myself professionally. I knew I could shoot. I knew I could edit video. And I knew that other people did that for a living outside of news. So I figured, well, I could start a business doing this, so that's what I did. And I had no idea on how to start a business or run a business, as Dan knows.
Nor did I.
And so I did that and started out as Schieve Photo, and then decided to change the name because people would go, "What are you guys, like a camera store or what?" So Tweety, I thought of the name Tweety Productions, and if you whatever word you put in conjunction with productions, it just sounds cool. So that's what it had to be.
And will you tell the story of where you came up with Tweety Productions?
Yeah, it was Tweety was the name I called my sister when we were both little kids. And my sister passed away about 10 years ago now. Man, it's probably more than that. 20 years ago. Anyway. But when we were little kids, my dad would call her Sweetie. And I couldn't pronounce Sweetie, so I said Tweety. So that was what I called her. And then Dan came to work with me a couple of years after I had started the business. And, the name, using my name, Schieve, as a name of the business really didn't fit. And we started talking about changing the name. And one day that name just popped into my head. Like, that's it. That's the name. And fortunately, Dan agreed.
I'm a very agreeable person, as you know.
I can attest to that.
Yeah.
So Dan and I worked together for several years, and we brought in a colleague of ours from Channel 27, Sandy Koal, who was a photographer and a producer. Still
She's
is.
also going to be on the show coming up. So.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, I better say good things about her.
Others have, so you better too. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we added Mac Charlton, who used to work at 27.
We also have to get on this program.
And we heard Steve Donovan, who used to work at Channel 27.
Also coming up on our next episode.
Do you notice a theme here?
See the pattern?
Yeah, yeah. We
And
always
we
joke
hired-
that
we-
we were the island of misfit toys for Channel 27.
Yeah.
I described you. I said all my favorite people are working together at Tweety Productions.
We had one employee who did not work at Channel 27 ever, and we always joked with her, like, you have to go and get a job at 27 and work there one day and then quit to complete the cycle. So,
But it was too late because they didn't even have camera. They didn't have floor crew by then anymore. So
yeah.
couldn't hire her.
So we ran the business for a while, and then I decided, or we as a team, Sandy, Dan, and I were owners, and we started talking about, Greg, what are you going to do for the rest of your life? And
And who are your clients? I mean, not like naming
clients.
names, but what kind of work did you do?
We did corporate work, a lot of corporate work, because corporations have the money to pay for the production. We did quite a bit of work for the technical college system.
I
in
did some of that.
Wisconsin.
Yeah, that was fun
Univers-
stuff.
The University of Wisconsin,
Mhm.
nonprofits, pretty much everything, pretty much the whole gamut of. We didn't do a lot of TV commercials. We did some, but not a whole lot. Our niche was more storytelling, long form type of videos.
And those companies that did the commercials were still, in many cases, and this has changed too, those were some of the larger companies that
Yeah.
had many more contacts with directors and cinematographers and people
Yeah.
who shot, and it's still like that today to some extent. I think the
Yeah.
really beautiful looking commercials are shot by
Yeah.
the people who are really great directors and great cinematographers, and they might not be a big company, but they're plugged into that world. So
Right. Right.
our world was because we were news guys at one point.
Yeah.
We're telling those short form stories and some long form stories, and we did a documentary.
In the Red Zone, the only Camp Randall DVD filled with great stories from one of our most treasured places.
Which was probably the most fun, I would say, that we had in terms of producing something.
Yeah.
And it was a huge learning curve, right?
Yeah. Well, it was like, you hear people who self-publish books. We self-published a documentary, and it was my idea, but I got Dan convinced to ride along.
Again, I'm very easygoing, amenable.
I heard that, but it was at the time the Badgers or Wisconsin was doing a huge remodel of Camp Randall. I always tell people I'm very proud of the work that we did on that. I think it turned out really nice. We just didn't sell, we didn't sell what we needed to sell, what we hoped to sell. And it's tough. It's tough to sell something in this consumer society.
Well, I remember we had a meeting with the folks at UW, and they told us, well, typically those will sell about 6,000 copies or something like that.
Yeah.
And we're like, oh, well, we're going to sell way more than that.
Yeah.
Well,
We
we
were so
did in
full
the
of
end,
ourselves.
but it wasn't that many more. And we were just like, we didn't believe them. We should have believed them.
Yeah. I think we sold about 20,000.
Wow, that sounds like a lot to me.
Yeah, but we got to talk to a lot of really cool old Badgers, and one of the guys that sticks out in my mind is Sam Bear, who played way back in the 1920s against Newt Rockneys. Fighting Irish. So that was pretty cool. All of that kind of stuff was fun. So, sometimes you don't make money or a lot of money on something, but you learn a lot and you get to meet some interesting people. So, I mean, it's like the news business in some ways.
Yeah.
So
I remember
circle.
our production process when we actually were in the editing phase, and we were coming up. It was that summer before the season, so we had to get this thing together. And Dan would write a chapter and give it to me, and then I'd edit the chapter, and then Dan would write another one. And I'd work on Saturdays a lot of times just to get the editing done. And
I'm sorry, Greg. I'm a
That's
deadline guy. I had to have the deadline in front of me. So now, Greg,
go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, now, of course, we went through that. We had the business. You retired. Sandy and I kept it going for a little bit, and then Sandy went off on her own because I decided I didn't want to do that anymore. And you were retired, but you're not. You're still doing stuff. What are you doing now?
Schieve photos still happening. Find him on Etsy.
I can never quit. And in retirement, it's kind of funny in retirement because a lot of people think, oh, now I'm on vacation all the time. I could just have fun. I could just watch TV all day or go to the beach. Wait a minute, there's no beach here. So
at the lake there.
You obviously have to fill your days with something, and I don't want to I'm not a type of person who just wants to be busy, you know, to like, I'll join a club just to be busy. You know, I want to do something meaningful. Not meaningful, that's too high and mighty, but just something that's interests me and keeps me active and going. So I still shoot a lot of still pictures.
Beautiful
I hit,
pictures, by the way.
what's that?
Beautiful stuff too.
What'd you say?
It's beautiful stuff. Beautiful pictures.
Thank
In the
you.
words
I
of
have
Donald
a
Sutherland.
Etsy shop that I try to sell through.
What is the name of that so people can find you?
I think it's Schieve Photo. I don't know. There's a
Think?
link. Well,
he has the link. He has the link somewhere.
I didn't know there was going to be a test.
We'll put it in the.
Yeah,
we'll put it in the
we'll
show
put it
notes.
in the
Don't
show
worry.
notes for you.
All right.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, and actually, I think it's in some of our other promotional things as well. And then, what is your inspiration? Because you take a lot of nature photos, right?
Yes, I like just being out, especially up in the Northwoods of Wisconsin. And so I see a beautiful scene or something where weather conditions are doing a certain thing, the lighting is working a certain way, and I try to make a photo of what I'm seeing. A lot of times there's nothing happening, so I don't shoot it. I don't shoot it just to shoot it. I want to shoot things that are a bit different looking and have a different mood to them, or whatever you want to call it.
That's that artist eye from college. Where did you go to college, by the way? I don't think we talked about that.
I started at Carthage College in Kenosha and ended up at UW Parkside. That's where I got my degree from.
Well, and before we let you go, because
I don't want to go.
Well,
you don't have to go.
We're going to let you go sooner or later because, you know, we are not retired. But I'm going to ask you what your worst job is, or at least maybe your most interesting job outside of the TV business, because I think I know what you're going to say. I'm hoping I know what you're going to say. I want you to. What was your worst job, Gregg?
Really? You think you know, huh? You think you know me? I prepared for this question because I know that you asked it. You ask it of people on the show here. My worst job was actually at a box factory.
A box factory?
We made boxes, fiberboard, not cardboard, fiberboard boxes.
Where?
And it was in Racine. It was a summer job, and you would work this job and you would get paper cuts, and like it was just the most boring and mundane job. And I worked with a guy who was kind of a company man, and he would get all, oh, we got to do it this way, and come on, man. Like, whatever, dude, you know, like
you were a teenager, you didn't care.
I know. And I worked second shift, so we would end our shift. You had to clean up your area before you left your for the day. And so people would start cleaning up, and then they'd be done, and they couldn't make any more boxes because they are already cleaned up. So we'd end up getting to the time clock, and we'd all be sitting there by the time clock waiting for midnight to hit. And this one guy who was kind of like the Fonz, he would just pace up. He would pace back and forth and go, "This is shit," you know, like we gotta wait here. I want to go. Like, we gotta wait here for 10 more minutes.
I thought you were going to say it was the job at the AMC plant.
Yeah, that was equally as mundane and boring, but I got paid a lot more.
Yeah, that helps.
Back in the day.
Tell Carrie what you did there, though, too, because I mean, it'll make you never want to drive another car.
I did several jobs, but one maybe you're referring to was the repair job.
Yeah, your repair job there.
Yeah, the cars would come down the line, and if something got screwed up, I worked in after the cars were painted, they would come into our department, and we'd put all the interior stuff into it and all the trim and all that stuff. And then it would go on and get put onto the chassis after that. So on this line, if something got screwed up, there'd be a repair ticket, or there'd be a repair person right there who would fix it right at the time. But then if it got to be too much, like let's say something prevented someone from putting the heater under the dashboard, that would just screw everything up, because then you couldn't finish the dashboard and all that stuff. So then it would come to like a repair area that I worked in for a time, and we would have to do those more extensive things. We'd have more time to fix the car. But the thing I noticed about working there is when they changed over to a new model year, everything just went to hell.
Oh no.
Because there were all these new things going into the car and people couldn't handle it, and there were bugs, in the parts and all that stuff, and there would just be all these repairs that would have had to been made.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Well, there's a reason AMC is not around anymore.
Yeah. And I will say I worked there 1 year into the fall, and there was right up to Christmas time, and at Christmas they were going to take a 1 week shutdown of the plant for a Christmas break, and the line was like one big huge party that night. So, if you bought a car,
want to buy that model.
If you bought a car that was made on the night before Christmas break,
oh boy,
it was probably going to have problems.
Oh my God.
Those were the good old days.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Well, Gregg, thank you so much for being on Old News with us today, because you are definitely old news.
Gregg, I understand there's one more thing you'd like to say. Yeah, hi, Mom. I'm John Stofflet, and that's Back Pages.
All right, thank you, Gregg.
Thanks for tuning in to Old News with Dan and Carrie.
That's old news for now.
Join us next time.